whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. E haere ake nei, Aotearoa gets a one-off public holiday to celebrate the life of Queen Elizabeth II. Her Majesty's journey continues. She'll be moved to St Giles Cathedral in Edinburgh overnight New Zealand time. And for the first time, the public will be able to file past Queen Elizabeth's coffin as she lies guarded by royal archers. The floral tributes keep growing at Buckingham Palace. We're live to Corrandan in London. In other news, the COVID traffic light system is gone at midnight. Now that means new mask and isolation rules, and we will have all the details for you. Check us out, Sky Channel 83.
RNZ News at 5 o'clock. Ngā mihi o te rā, good afternoon. Ko Sarah Bradley tēnei. It's lights out for the traffic light system as the government moves to scrap the COVID-19 protection framework. As of midnight tonight, masks will only be required in health and aged care settings, and household contacts don't have to isolate with cases if they return daily negative RAT tests results. All government vaccine mandates will also go in 2 weeks, leaving it up to the individual employer's discretion to enforce requirements. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern says with high vaccination rates, low case numbers and access to antiviral medicines, New Zealand is ready to move forward.
This is a time when finally, rather than feeling that COVID dictates what happens to us, our lives and our future, we take control back as we continue to drive economic activity and our recovery.
Jacinda Ardern says isolating COVID-19 cases and using treatments remain an important way to protect those most vulnerable to COVID-19. Meanwhile, businesses are applauding the move to scrap the COVID traffic light system and get rid of masks. Hospitality New Zealand says it's the best news it's had for 2.5 years and will make all the difference to cafes and restaurants. Business leader Kirk Hope says it's encouraging that the government is trusting individual firms to decide how they will limit the spread of the virus. New Zealand's state memorial service for the Queen will be held on the same day as a one-off public holiday. The Prime Minister has announced the holiday will be held on Monday, September the 26th, to honour the Queen. The memorial service will also be held in the Wellington Cathedral of St Paul on that day. Jacinda Ardern says the holiday will be called Queen Elizabeth II Memorial Day, and legislation will be passed next week to bring it into force. Ms Ardern will travel to London on Wednesday with the Governor-General to represent New Zealand at the Queen's funeral. But there are mixed reactions to the news of a one-off public holiday in 2 weeks to honour the Queen. Some people on the streets of Christchurch are already planning what they will do.
Oh, I really do, yeah. Absolutely. I'll hopefully take the Friday as well and, yeah, have a good break.
I don't think we really need a public holiday. I think we can think about the Queen without a holiday.
Business New Zealand and the ACT Party are against the idea. Many New Zealanders planning to fly to London for the Queen's funeral will be disappointed as flights and accommodation are in high demand. The Flight Centre says it can't find flights for everyone, and some are being forced to pay top dollar for indirect routes through other countries. A spokesperson, Victoria Courtney, says several airlines are putting on extra flights, but finding somewhere to stay is also a challenge.
Certainly, I can't imagine it will be easy to find accommodation, so my advice to people would be to find a friend who's got a sofa to sleep on is probably the easiest option.
Victoria Courtney says the demand for flights to the UK was already high after international border rules eased. One of the 5 people killed in the boating accident south of Kaikoura on Saturday is being described as a person who lived life to the full. Susan Cade was with 10 others on a photography trip at Goose Bay when their charter boat overturned. The former Wellington Mayor, Celia Wade-Brown, was involved in a Wellington sea kayaking group with Ms Cade. She says Ms Cade lived life to the full, even in her final moments.
Not only was she doing something that she loved, but that she also packed a lot into her life. Some people manage one hobby, and she managed her dancing, her photography and her kayaking, and that there may be more things that I don't know about.
Maritime New Zealand, the police and the Transport Safety Investigation Commission are investigating the tragedy. Spanish teenager Carlos Alcaraz has completed his rapid rise to the top of the tennis world, claiming his first Grand Slam title and taking the #1 ranking. The 19-year-old, who is touted as the next Rafa Nadal, beat Norway's Casper Ruud in 4 sets in the US Open final in New York.
It's crazy for me, you know. I've never thought that I was going to achieve something like that at 19 years old. For me, it's unbelievable. This is something that I dreamed since I was a kid.
Alcaraz is the youngest world #1 since the ATP rankings began in 1973, while Casper Ruud will rise to #2 in the world, up from 7.
Gave it all. I left it all out on the court and played some phenomenal tennis. So I'm very happy in the end. So hopefully get another chance at a slam in the future.
All Whites coach Danny Hay has named a 24-strong squad for the side's first match against Australia in 11 years. The squad includes veterans Chris Wood and Winston Reid, along with 2 newcomers, defender Kyle Adams, who plays for San Diego in the MLS, and Wellington Phoenix goalkeeper Alex Paulson. The 2 sides will play first in Brisbane on September the 22nd and again 3 days later at Eden Park in Auckland. It will be the All Whites' first home game since 2017. And Australian driver Will Power has won the IndyCar's championship title after finishing 3rd in the final round in California. Scott Dixon finished 12th, meaning he finishes 3rd in the championship, while fellow New Zealander Scott McLaughlin was 6th, finishing 4th overall. And that's the news.
Hello listener, it's Nathan here, host of First Up, which is RNZ's show that's on in the wee hours of the morning. Now, people who wake up at 5 a.m. say things like, "Oh, it's the best part of the day," which is a lie. I mean, it's early and sleep is important. But now, through the wonders of podcast technology, you can experience First Up at any time, day or night. You could listen to the First Up podcast on your commute, trip to the supermarket, or even in a darkened room to give it that authentic 5 a.m. feel. A full episode of First Up will be waiting for you wherever you find podcasts, the good ones. So subscribe now to the First Up podcast.
This is RNZ National. We're funded through New Zealand On Air. Te reo, irirangi o Aotearoa. Time now for the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. For Northland to Waikato, also Coromandel and Bay of Plenty. Occasional showers, some possibly thundery today. Waitomo to Manawatu, including the central high country. Showers, some heavy with thunderstorms possible tomorrow. Northwest gales in exposed places today. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay mostly fine, the chance of a shower. A period of northwest gales in exposed places. Horu Whenua to Wellington, also Wairarapa, Marlborough and Nelson. Showers clearing tonight, fine at first tomorrow, then showers from late morning. A period of northwest gales in exposed places. Bulla, Westland and Fiordland, showers heavy and thundery at times. For Canterbury, mainly fine. Isolated showers today. Showers developing about the high country tomorrow morning, spreading elsewhere later with thunderstorms possible and snow lowering to 500 metres. For Otago and Southland, occasional showers, some possibly thundery tomorrow with snow lowering to 300 metres. And for the Chatham Islands, periods of rain easing tomorrow and gale northeasterlies today. You're listening to RNZ National. It's coming up to 8 minutes past 5. I'll have the headlines in about 15 minutes.
Nā mihi eho, tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai ki checkpoint e tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Tonight, the traffic light system is gone from midnight, and the only place you'll have to wear a mask is in healthcare and aged care facilities. Only COVID-positive people have to isolate for 7 days, and household contacts no longer need to. All government vaccine mandates will end in 2 weeks, and all vaccine requirements for incoming travellers and crew are gone too. We'll have reaction to this shortly, but first, the government has also just announced New Zealand has a new public holiday for this year only. In honour of the Queen, Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern says the 26th of September will be a national holiday.
This, I hope, will be a chance to acknowledge a lifetime of service to New Zealand by Queen Elizabeth II, but also mark the new chapter which we now enter.
And that is Te Piremia Jacinda Ardern. Our political editor, Jane Patterson, is standing by in Parliament. Jane, there was a bit of opposition to this, but it seems, the government wasn't put off by that?
That's right. So Business New Zealand this morning said that given the disruption that has already occurred in New Zealand for lots of businesses and the pressure that they're under, the costs of holding even a one-off public holiday was just really a step too far. And they were calling for that decision not to be made, that we just mark it, but people wouldn't necessarily have a public holiday. There are also concerns maybe from education that school kids have had a really disruptive year, and for the healthcare system as well, that at a time when planned operations, for example, are being backed up, the last thing the health system needs is, and patients need, is a public holiday. But she said that actually in terms of that economic impact, there's quite a range of net benefit, potentially of 27 million, or a net cost of over 136 million. So there is potential for it actually to be good for business. There are no trading restrictions, but that's going to be quite specific to hospitality, retail, potentially those kind of businesses. But Ms Ardern said, look, all of those things were taken into account, and the decision was made that this is such a significant event that it deserves a national public holiday.
Why is the National Memorial not for another 2 weeks?
Mainly, I would say, because of the Prime Minister's travel schedule. So, of course, she leaves on Wednesday to go to the UK for the Queen's funeral, but then has already a pre-planned trip to the United Nations General Assembly in New York. So she will travel from London to New York. And look, this is an important week, especially with the Ukraine conflict. It's an opportunity to get some face time with some very influential world leaders. So that would have been something that she was keen to attend, and on the basis of that schedule, giving her time to get back to the country for that national memorial service that will be held on the same day as that public holiday on the 26th, and it will be at St Paul's Cathedral in Wellington.
There is a date clash, right, for the South Canterbury Anniversary Day. So what happens with that?
That's right. So those of you in South Canterbury might have been a bit alarmed because your local anniversary also falls on that day. The Prime Minister said that was raised. It was noted at Cabinet and they talked about it, but basically I think that was appears to be one of the few dates available that would have suited this event. So now it's up to the local leadership, and I imagine that's local regional councils and potentially, I suppose, business interests, Chamber of Commerce, about whether they want to shift that day and have it another day. Otherwise, there is a risk that South Canterbury may miss out on one of their public holidays.
Kia ora rā, Jane. That is Jane Patterson, our political editor, live from Parliament. It's 12 minutes past 5. Kia mau tonu mai. Stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. He aha o whakaaro. What do you think of that? Are you happy to have another holiday to honour the Queen? Let us know your thoughts. You can text us on 2101 or you can email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. The Queen's coffin now lies in Edinburgh, where thousands of mourners have lined the streets to greet its arrival from Balmoral in the Scottish Highlands. People flocked to watch its journey from throughout the country, some throwing flowers in the path of the procession. The coffin will be flown to London on Tuesday UK time, where it will lie in state for 4 days before the Queen's funeral in Westminster Hall. With a wrap of the day's events from the UK, here's the BBC's Alan Little.
It is the place she loved most. Balmoral was not a royal residence, but a private home to her. Her annual respite from the burdens of state and the unrelenting public gaze. Today, that gaze falls on this, the first public sight of the coffin of the Queen. She'd known this landscape since she was a child. From Balmoral to Aberdeen, they passed slowly through towns and villages that knew her not just as the Queen, but as their neighbour. Aboyne, Kincardine O'Neill, Bankery, Drumoak, Petercouter. What is the symbolism of this measured progress, if not to say that she was rooted here, at home in the open green spaces of Royal Deeside? In Aberdeen, they stood in quiet witness before the cortege turned south towards the Scottish capital. In Edinburgh, the King's bodyguard for Scotland, the Royal Company of Archers, came to attend the noon proclamation of the reign of King Charles. At several points, a small group of protesters booed and called for an independent Scottish Republic, but this was not the prevailing mood.
Probably one of the most important days of my life, to see the actual Prince Charles become king and be proclaimed here in Edinburgh.
I wish Prince, the King, should I say, all the best for the future. I think he has big boots to fill.
It's just so historic, and it's just something like just really important in history, and I feel so honored to be here and be able to see it. It's just something else.
After Stonehaven, Brechin, Dundee, Perth, over the Forth and into Edinburgh. From Edinburgh Castle, the last mile is appropriately the Royal Mile, at the foot of which sits the monarch's official residence, the Palace of Holyrood House. This is where the Queen's ancestor, King James VI of Scotland, learned that he'd inherited the throne of England on the death of the first Elizabeth, thus uniting the two kingdoms in a regal union. The bearer party, formed by the Royal Regiment of Scotland, carried the coffin past 3 of the Queen's children. The Princess Royal had accompanied her mother's coffin on its progress from Balmoral. Here, the coffin of the Queen will lie in rest in the throne room, before being taken tomorrow to St Giles Cathedral, where it will lie for 24 hours. For the people who lined the quiet streets today, this is the ritualising of a nation's sorrow. But it is something else too, the ritualising of transition, the crown passing from mother to son, and the public expectation of continuity.
Meanwhile, in London, people have still been streaming to Buckingham Palace to lay floral tributes. Corin Dan and cameraman Nick Monroe are in London.
Well, it's about 4 o'clock down here at Buckingham Palace. We came down thinking we could just head on up to the front of the palace to see the flowers, but the queue here is about 4 to 5 hours long. There are people absolutely everywhere. You wouldn't say that the mood is super sombre, but it is certainly calm and respectful, and there is a sense that the activities here over the next week are going to be something quite extraordinary.
The Queen's been part of my life since I was a little girl. I've always dreamt of shaking the Queen's hand, but it will have to be the other side of eternity now.
The preparations already going underway. Police security is very tight. Of course, the focus for the next few days after the weekend really is going to be the Queen making her way to London and to Buckingham Palace, and then on to Westminster Hall to Lion State for 4 days, where we are then likely to see an extraordinary event in itself, in that there will be hundreds of thousands of people queuing up to pay their respects in person. Some of those we spoke to here were planning to head into London at 2 or 3 in the morning, and they expected to queue for hours to do that.
Paddington requested, us to accompany him to show his respect to Her Majesty, but this looks like as far as we can get.
If it's a test, it really is a sort of test to see your durability or whatever, to make quite sure you'll stay and you'll queue 10 hours. You probably may not have the time, but the spirit is there, and it's just nice to be with everyone else here.
You could certainly sense in everyone we've talked to here that this is something quite special.
And ko taku hoa e nai ko Corin Dan. Corin Dan joins us now live from London. Kia ora, Corin. You've had a chance to talk to some people there. Give us a bit of a sense of the mood.
Kia ora, Lisa. Yeah, well, I was a little surprised yesterday going down to the palace. I mean, obviously I expected big crowds. It was absolutely heaving. 4 or 5 hour queues just to try and even get up to the front of the palace. So many were just leaving their flowers at little trees and those sorts of things. A few were a bit disappointed, but generally it was a sense of great, I wouldn't say festive, because it was a solemn occasion. It was sober, but there was an energy, a real energy there about the week to come and about what is happening. That history is unfolding right before their eyes, and they want to be part of it. They feel some need to come and queue for 5 hours to lay those flowers. It's quite amazing, really, to watch that. So I think it's Trepidation too, because this city is filling up. I mean, I think the Times is reporting that London might be full in a couple of days' time. I don't know what that means, but they are expecting about 1 million or so people to be on the streets for the state funeral, and hundreds of thousands to then, of course, queue up for that lying in state. The queue time estimated to be 20 hours. 20 hours to queue up to see the Queen lying in state.
Absolutely remarkable. And, you know, no one does pomp and ceremony quite like the British. So you kind of hinted at the fact that there are signs that things are already starting to gear up. What are you seeing in terms of funeral preparations? Anything obvious?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, oh, absolutely. You can just see there's a flurry of activity down at the mall in terms of like all the scaffolding being set up for stages and for all the barriers being put up. Portaloos are going up everywhere. There's thousands of police everywhere. You can't walk anywhere in London at the moment without seeing a lot of police and a lot of security. They are worried about security here, one-off protests and those sort of things during that particularly that lying in state. And there's a whole bunch of rules being laid down for people going there about taking food and drink and not having objectionable material and all these sorts of things. You've got to be screened to go through. So, yeah, I mean, this is London after all, so it is full on. Yeah, there are electronic billboards everywhere with Queen Elizabeth II on them. There are flags everywhere, of course, and the souvenir shops are doing a roaring trade already. So, yeah, there's a sense that this is building, but this is only early days because, as we know, things are still unfolding in Scotland with the procession of the Queen's casket down to London. That's got another day or so to roll out, so it's still early days in this process.
And Corin, you were there with all those people queuing to lay their flowers outside Buckingham Palace, but some tributes are now off limits. And I think you talked to someone who had one of those. Explain, please.
Oh, yeah. Well, the Paddington bear has become a real symbol for some reason around the Queen. I think because of initially Paddington did the little cameo with the Queen during, was it the Olympics and James Bond and all that stuff where she really got involved. And Paddington has become a real symbol. There's a lot of children, a lot of kids there, although the person we talked to wasn't a kid, he was a fully grown man and he had Paddington on his bike. And he'd brought him down and he was pulling him out and telling me and talking to Paddington and how important it was for Paddington to be there. Now, the authorities are saying, don't leave your Paddington bears as a tribute because they want organic matter. They don't want to be dealing with something that they can't potentially put in a compost because, let's face it, there are hundreds of thousands of bouquets of flowers they've got to deal with at some point. They want it to degrade, I suppose. They're also saying don't leave marmalade sandwiches because that's what people have been doing as well, a favourite food, of course, of Paddington bear. So, yeah, I mean, it's a quirky little thing, but it's interesting that is something that has resonated with particularly children, but people in London.
I think the stuffed corgis are included in that as well, Corin, so only flowers, as you say.
I'm sure they are.
It's lovely to talk to you. Thank you for joining us. Corin Dan there, live from London. It is 22 after 5 and you're with Checkpoints on RNZ National. Homai o whakaaro, we would love your feedback. We do enjoy hearing from you. Don't forget you can text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Let us know in particular what you make of the public holiday. This is to commemorate the life and service of Queen Elizabeth II. It is a one-off, one-day holiday this year only. Do send us your thoughts. And it's time for us to go to the headlines. Ko Sarah anō tēnei.
Kia ora, Lisa. Businesses are applauding the government's move to scrap the COVID traffic light system and get rid of masks. Hospitality New Zealand says it's the best news since the pandemic began and will make all the difference to cafes and restaurants. Business leader Kirk Hope is encouraged that the government is trusting individual firms to decide whether to require workers to be immunised. Cabinet has this afternoon ended all mask requirements except for healthcare settings and aged care facilities. People who test positive must still isolate for 7 days, but household contacts no longer have to. Government vaccine mandates will also end in 2 weeks. More people will have access to one of the main COVID antiviral drugs from Wednesday. Everyone over the age of 65 and all Māori and Pacifica people over 50 will automatically get access to antiviral drugs if they test positive for COVID-19. From Tuesday, the reporting of COVID-19 case numbers and hospitalisations will become weekly, not daily. Cabinet today also announced a one-off public holiday and state memorial service on Monday, September the 26th, to mark the death of Queen Elizabeth II. Thousands of mourners filled the street of Edinburgh to mark the arrival of the Queen's coffin after a 6-hour journey from Balmoral Castle in the Scottish Highlands. Business New Zealand and the ACT Party are opposed to the New Zealand public holiday. To traffic now, and in Auckland, a crash is blocking the right westbound lane on State Highway 16 after the St Luke's off-ramp. Pass with care and expect delays. And in Otago, State Highway 94 is now fully closed between Hollyford, the East Gate, and Don River, the West Gate, due to forecasted snow. It may reopen tomorrow. I'll have updated news headlines and traffic around 20 to 6.
Ngā mihi, Sarah. At midnight, the government's pulling the plug on its COVID traffic light system. Now, that means the only place you'll have to wear a mask is health and aged care facilities, including pharmacies. COVID-positive people will need to continue isolating for the 7 days, but household contacts no longer need to. And all vaccine mandates end in a fortnight on September 26th. Our reporter Louise Tanous has been out and about seeing what people think about this and joins us now. Kia ora, Louise. How's the news going down?
Yeah, well, there's been a lot of expectation leading up to this decision that the traffic light framework would be scrapped. Now, we've been using that framework since December last year, when it essentially replaced the alert level system we'd previously been using, and we've been in orange since around about April. So there has been a lot of expectation that it would be scrapped, but still, though, a lot of mixed reaction on the streets today, talking to people about whether or not it was the right move, with mask use kind of at the top of most people's concerns now that there's a lack of it, essentially, apart from in aged care facilities. And for businesses, it's essentially up to them to decide whether or not they decide to make people use them.
So it's scrapped altogether. You have to move on sometime, I suppose. Hey, that's kind of my thinking about it, working in health through the whole thing.
I feel a bit lost without it, to be honest. I think we're still in this pandemic, and I think that we've still got many virus strains to come, so I feel a bit lost without it. I didn't actually realise I didn't realise they'd scrapped it, but no, that's a bit scary.
It's a hard one, isn't it? We're not sure whether, we'll get another, time when we get a lot of cases again. Well, I'm not sure. It might be a good thing because so many, retails and stuff are suffering.
But it is always good for business, and I think for the whole country as well to start getting out of it.
I think we're opening ourselves up to some further strains on the hospital system. I'm a bit worried about that, to be honest.
And that's people on the streets of Auckland talking to Louise Tanous about the end of the traffic light system. Well, joining us to discuss the changes is Auckland University epidemiologist Professor Rod Jackson. Kia ora, Rod. Does this mean it's over? That's it for the pandemic?
I hope, but it's the next variant that we have to worry about. I think at the moment it's all those decisions are quite reasonable because we still have a variant that vaccination and prior infection seems to protect against severe disease and death for the vast majority of people. So I think, at the moment we're okay, but it's all about what the next variant looks like.
So, for people who are listening rather than watching, I can see a collection of masks over your shoulder there, Rod. So, I'm wondering, are you going to feel comfortable going to the supermarket without that? Will you feel comfortable going to the mall without that? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so if I'm in a confined space, I won't feel comfortable. So, my advice to people who, like me, won't feel comfortable is get a good mask. Make sure you've got an N95 mask. That is incredibly protective for most of us. And so in a mall, if it's open, well ventilated, I'm less concerned. If it's on a bus, that's the one thing I am concerned about with the current advice, because there's no longer mandatory mask wearing on buses. I think that's a mistake, unless they've got some information that I don't have. I would have kept it on public transport. I think it makes total sense to keep it in healthcare, including pharmacies and aged care. On the buses, I would be concerned. In confined spaces, I would be concerned. So I'm going to make sure that I'm wearing a high-quality mask in those settings.
So is that the one place that you think there has been a misstep by the government in terms of public transport?
Yeah, public transport, and I include planes in public transport. So, yeah, because those are settings where you're sitting right, next to somebody, and you don't know whether they've got COVID. They may not know whether they've got COVID. So that's a setting where I think we should have retained masks.
Do you accept that it's no longer an acute public health risk, COVID? It's endemic rather than a pandemic?
Today?
Yeah.
Yes. Today, but as opposed to today, as opposed to tomorrow. Yeah, and I think that's, the biggest threat with COVID is a new variant. And this is a highly contagious bug. It's much more contagious than the flu. And I think that's the big difference. Whereas, one person on average will infect 2 other people with the flu. COVID, left to its own devices, affects 10 people. So there is still this huge difference between the flu and COVID. So endemic, I think we're pushing it to think we're in an endemic phase now. We're at this current wave, looks like it's almost over. We're going into summer. I think we'll have a pretty good summer because we're outside more. We're not in those confined spaces. But it all depends on the next variant. And whether it's more severe.
So, Rod, knowing what you know about these things, are you anticipating that by winter next year we will be back in the danger zone?
Yeah, sadly.
Oh,
yes.
Really?
But look, there is some good news. There's lots of good drugs now that we know what works. We know that high quality masks work. And there are people all over the world, labs all over the world working on new vaccines. And I think the Nirvana is a vaccine that can cope with any variant. And that's, these so-called universal vaccines. And that's what we're hoping for. So there's kind of 2 things. We hope there's not a new variant that's more severe than the current one. And we hope we're going to get new vaccines.
Well, if vaccination is nirvana and you're expecting by next winter we need to be exceptionally careful, why is there no talk about getting everyone vaccinated again in terms of a booster? And where do we need to be at with that to get our timing right?
Yeah, that's a hard one. But my view is that everyone should be fully primed right now. So I've had my 4 doses. And I think every New Zealander who is eligible for a booster, whether that's the 3rd or 4th, should go out and get it. And you just reminded me, the one other thing is I would have kept the rule that unless you're a New Zealander, you can't come into the country unless you're vaccinated. I don't see any reason why we should allow visitors in who aren't vaccinated, because if you are vaccinated, you have significant protection against severe disease and death. So that seemed a bit strange to me, that one.
Really appreciate your time this evening. Ngā mihi mō te wā. Thanks for joining us. That is Professor Rod Jackson, epidemiologist at Auckland University. Let us know what you think of the changes, 2101 on text, or you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. Are you going to keep wearing your mask? Where in particular? It is 28 minutes to 6. Kia mau tonu mai. Stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. Ko taku hoa e nei ko Anand Zaki. Anand Zaki is joining us for the business news, beaming in from Christchurch. Anand, not a great year for the superannuation fund. What's happened?
Kia ora, Lisa. No, it really hasn't. It's been a period of volatile financial markets, high inflation, rising interest rates, and that's meant the value of the New Zealand superannuation funds fallen by nearly 7%. The fund was, of course, created 19 years ago and to help to pay the cost of the pensions in the future. And it's down $3.3 billion to just under $56 billion for the June year. And it comes after a record gain last year. But, the good news is over the long term, it's got a rate of return of just under 10%. We heard from the chief executive of the super fund, Matt Winneray, and he said that despite the first 6 months of 2022 being an absolute shocker for the markets, the fund did show some resilience. It's cushioned its overall impact, delivering record value-added returns. Now, looking ahead, the super fund sees the days of the incredibly high returns, like the 29% growth that it saw last year, well, that's very much a thing of the past. We've got higher interest rates that's weighing on the market performance. Markets are entering a period of lower returns, and people should expect more ups and downs.
And what is the situation with the Airbnb operators? They're under pressure. Why is that?
Yeah, there was a recent report from the real estate company Colliers, and they are saying that Airbnb operators are feeling the weight of regulations and taxes. They say there's a decline in Airbnb and motel accommodation, and that's increasing the demand for hotels in areas outside of Auckland. Now, of course, among the notable places that introduced new rules for Airbnb is where I am in Christchurch. Earlier this year, the local council agreed to require resource consent for all short-term accommodation providers, with tougher regulations for houses that host more than 6 guests for more than 60 nights a year. So it attracted a lot of criticism from Airbnb at the time. So this drop in Airbnb accommodation, it's creating a demand for hotel development. So this is a really interesting space to watch.
And should we take a trot around the markets, Anand?
Well, the NZX 50 closed the day up 55 points, nearly 0.5% to 11,813. A2 Milk, the big gainer, gaining nearly 3%. New Zealand dollar, 61 US cents, 89.3 Australian. And for those of you travelling to the royal funeral, 52.5 British pence.
Thank you, Anand Zaki, joining us there from Christchurch with Business News. Friends and family are mourning the loss of 5 people killed in a boating tragedy off the coast of Kaikoura. Investigations are underway after the boat carrying 11 people capsized off Goose Bay on Saturday. Susan Cade, Kathy Haddock and Peter Charles Hockley are among those who died. 2 others are yet to be identified. Adam Burns reports.
Family and friends of those on board the Kaikoura charter boat, which capsized on Saturday, are still coming to terms with the tragedy. Peter Simpson says his wife of 30 years, Kathy Haddock, was on a bird photography trip which he was excited about. He then heard there was a boating accident on Saturday afternoon.
And I knew straight away that that would be Kathy's boat trip, because I knew she was going on the trip itself. So, and who with.
Mr Simpson did not want to speculate on potential causes of the tragedy until a full investigation had been carried out. He says his late wife loved the outdoors and spent much of her career working in that area.
Involved in several different activities, sea kayaking, cycling, tramping, skiing, all those sorts of things. Caving was another one too. So, she was quite well known in the outdoor world. And just what she really liked doing.
Miss Haddock's friend Susan Cade was also killed. Those who knew her say the Lower Hutt woman was much loved, fun-loving and quirky. Miss Cade's dance teacher Jo Matsis says her dance class was devastated and is still coming to terms with the tragedy.
She was in my class last Monday and we wished her well on her trip. And, we said we'll see you when you get back, and unbelievable.
Former Wellington Mayor Celia Wade-Brown is the co-chair of a Wellington sea kayaking group which Miss Cade was a member of. She says many in the kayaking community who also knew Miss Haddock have been dealt a double blow. Miss Wade Brown says if there was a small consolation, it was the fact she lived life to the full.
Not only was she doing something that she loved, but that she also packed a lot into her life. Some people manage one hobby, and she managed her dancing, her photography and her kayaking, and there may be more things that I don't know about.
Skipper Mark Elam is among 6 who survived the ordeal. His wife Charlene says she and her husband are devastated beyond words.
That what has happened is an unprecedented tragedy, and our thoughts and our prayers and our love are with the families and friends of the deceased.
Maritime New Zealand is continuing with its full investigation into the tragedy. There were earlier reports a collision with a whale was a possible cause. In a statement this afternoon, Kaikoura Mayor Craig Mackle says he did not want to speculate on what has happened, but will await the outcome of the investigation.
And that was Adam Burns reporting there. Time for a bit of your feedback now on the changes to the COVID system. Midnight tonight, the traffic light system's gone altogether. It means you don't have to wear a mask. The only places you do, health facilities, aged care. Now, that includes pharmacies. This listener says, I will still wear a mask in the supermarket, shopping malls, public transport and planes. Happy that people who are anti-mask will be free not to wear one. And our supermarket workers will stop being abused for a public health measure. I just hope to not be hassled for still choosing to wear one. And another texter says, no antivirals for under 65s. Are we allowed boosters anytime soon? Well, just checking the press material from the government, you get automatic access to those antivirals if you're over 65, if you're Māori over 50, automatic access. But there are circumstances where you can get access under those ages if you are at risk. So, ngā mihi mō o whakaaro. Thank you for your feedback. Do keep it coming. You can text us on 2101 or you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. And you are listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. It is 20 to 6. And just a reminder, we're keen to hear your thoughts, homai o whakaaro, on anything you've heard on the program this evening, whether it's that holiday to commemorate the life of Queen Elizabeth II or the changes to the COVID system. No traffic light from midnight this evening, so major changes to mask requirements and isolation requirements. Do get in touch, 2101 on text, or you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. Let's get to the headlines. Ane a Sarah mena pita pita kōrero.
Thanks, Lisa. Epidemiologist Rod Jackson has told Checkpoint the government should have continued to require people to wear masks on public transport. From midnight tonight, masks will only be required in healthcare settings and aged care facilities. Rod Jackson says COVID-19 is no longer an acute public health risk, but that could change if a more severe variant arrives. Rod Jackson hopes a new universal vaccine will be found and meanwhile advises people to keep wearing high-quality masks in confined spaces. Rod Jackson also says the government should have kept the vaccine requirement for overseas visitors. The government is lifting the vaccine mandate for incoming travellers and air crew. Business New Zealand this morning said it did not support a public holiday to honour the late Queen because it would be costly for businesses. The Prime Minister and Governor-General will travel to London on Wednesday to attend the funeral. The National Party supports having a public holiday, but ACT says small businesses should not have to pay for pageantry. Those are the headlines. I'll have a full news bulletin at 6.
Thanks, Sarah. The government has announced a new one-off public holiday for Monday the 26th of September in honour of the Queen. A state memorial service will be held the same day in the Wellington Cathedral of St Paul. The move has the backing of the National Party, but ACT and some business groups are against it. Neva Chittick reports.
The news of a new public holiday has gone down well, with some Kiwis looking forward to a bonus day off. Christchurch local Julian thinks a holiday in honour of the Queen is a great idea.
Oh, I really do, yeah. Absolutely. I'll hopefully take the Friday as well and, yeah, have a good break and remembrance and, yeah, it'll be nice.
Sue knows what she'll do for the day off.
We should recognise how long she's been on the throne. I thought it would be a sensible thing to do. I would hope it would be around the funeral time, so I'd spend all night watching the funeral.
Faye, on the other hand, doesn't think it's necessary.
I don't think we really need a public holiday, but I think we can think about the Queen without a holiday. Yeah, I'm thinking about it all the time at the moment.
Kirk Hope, Chief Executive of Business New Zealand, agrees and says even a one-off holiday will do damage to businesses.
Whatever they consider, if they do a halfway house or if they do a full public holiday, it imposes costs on businesses at a time when they've sustained some pretty heavy costs and losses as a result of the pandemic.
But First Union General Secretary Dennis Marga sees it differently. He says labour shortages are heaping bigger workloads onto people and many would enjoy a break.
Members will be welcoming the public holiday. It's up to the employers whether how open they are to recognize the need for this one. It's a busy year for everyone, and I think a public holiday like this will serve the culture and practice in the country. That's something that many workers will actually appreciate.
Cafe manager Sarah Ellis says the uncertainty over what the holiday would be like and whether they would open was hard.
All the other public holidays we plan for, we work it into our budget throughout the year. Surcharges aren't something that we do, so we work it into our budget. So it is, it is short notice, but we'd make it work.
Infometrics principal economist Brad Olsen says timing and design of the holiday will be crucial to how much of an impact it will have.
Of course, retail and hospitality not able to operate or having to pay, higher penal rates if they want staff to come in on those public holidays, which would be an additional cost to the business. If you were to have more people travelling around like you would on a normal holiday, there might be some money to be made up there in those sectors.
He says analysis done by the government showed matariki on a Friday would cost the country around $443 million. But there was an estimated $310 to $470 million benefit. Mr Olsen thinks there might not be as big a benefit on a day of national mourning and believes a wider discussion on public holidays is needed.
Do we have public holidays spread out in the way that we might want them? Are they too concentrated in any one area? And more importantly, do they celebrate and recognise the things that we need to celebrate and memorialise? I think there was a good case to be made for the Matariki holiday. But there was equally, in my mind, a good case to possibly get rid of the provincial holidays.
A national memorial for Queen Elizabeth will also be held on September 26th at an event in the Wellington Cathedral of St Paul.
And joining us now is Alan McDonald from the Employers and Manufacturers Association. Kia ora, Alan. What do you think of the holiday?
Well, it's kind of churlish not to say yes to the holiday, but it does impose quite a few costs and administrative tasks and things like that on employers, and probably at a time when many of them, particularly the SMEs, the smaller end of town, really don't need additional costs.
So what, you're saying you're okay with it, but it's going to hurt a little bit?
Yeah, a bit of both. I mean, the Queen's been a great servant and a great representative of the Commonwealth and just leadership in general. A truly historic figure, and I can't think of anything or anyone recently that might have approached that sort of magnitude, I suppose, and certainly not locally unless you go back to the likes of Sir Edmund Hillary or Norm Kirk, even when he died in office, those sorts of people.
Because it is a bit of a tough one. She gives 70 years of service and people are quibbling over a one-day holiday.
Yeah, I don't think quibbling's the right way to put it. It is short notice. It does come at a cost, and it will be problematic for people around adjusting their payroll, adjusting things like schedules for staffing rosters, deliveries. There'll be tradies that are booked all over the place that won't be turning up on that day and have to be rebooked. So there are some knock-on effects, and I think that just needs to be understood that. It doesn't come without a cost, it does come with a cost, and it is pretty short notice, and it will move quite a few things around and cause some disruption.
Is it not an opportunity as well, though, Alan, because there are no trading restrictions, right?
As far as I'm aware, there are no trading restrictions, but just to the earlier point that I was listening in on, for example, on the big public holidays, a lot of people travel and do extra things. Well, it's pretty short notice, and flights are fairly heavily booked at the moment, so you might not be able to do that. So that sort of boost that comes from the spend may not be as big.
Let's talk about the traffic light system today, the other announcement from the government, which is gone at midnight this evening. Essentially, masks are gone, except in health and aged care facilities. Isolation only for those people who are infected, no longer household contacts having to stay home for 7 days. What difference is this going to make for business?
Oh, I think it's symbolic as much as anything, because you've seen quite widespread, not civil disobedience, but non-compliance. And I think it's a really positive signal, both domestically, because it does kind of signal the end of the restrictions and the restraints we've been living under, but also internationally it sends quite a big signal that we are in fact open. It's a bit hard to convince people we're open for business when you've still got orange restrictions on your international travellers. So I think that's a really good positive. I'm sure it'll be welcomed, particularly in the hospital and retail sectors where there were some odd rules and restrictions around that. It'd be interesting to see if it actually encourages a few people to go back to work in the hospital and retail sectors, because they won't have to wear a mask all day. So those sorts of impacts, and I think business in general, just welcome to see the back of them, and also that shift to you decide what you want to do is the way it should be, I think, in the future. If we do have any other sort of restrictions imposed on us, if you can meet those restrictions, then you can open. Let's not pick winners and losers.
Okay, so Alan, that's gone, right? So now what's the biggest challenge for business? If you had to name one thing, what is it? If it's not COVID, what is it now?
Finding people and finding skills.
Really appreciate your time, Alan. That is Alan McDonald from the Employers and Manufacturers Association. A lot of you getting in touch about the holiday. Amy says, yes, in capital letters, a holiday, yes, please. We've had COVID, then the Ukraine conflict, plus inflation, then the death of our monarch. A day off is really appreciated. Thank you. A once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to acknowledge a historical event. Agree with the decision, says Marie. Leslie, though, not so much. Absolutely no to another public holiday at the cost of about $450 million, borne by all taxpayers, and in particular small business still struggling to get over COVID restrictions. If both major parties support this, this can't be a vote catcher. And another person says, I think there should be an official Memorial Day for Queen Elizabeth, but maybe it should have been on a weekend day so it was less disruptive. And this one before we move on. This texter says they're disgusted the public holiday is not on a weekend day. Wouldn't be a holiday then, would it? They say it's extremely disappointing given the pressure on New Zealand business. The Queen would be horrified, they reckon. It is 10 minutes to 6. Kia mau tonu mai. Stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National and 2101 on text if you'd like to add your views to the discussion. One of the main routes out of Wellington, State Highway 59, is set to reopen following weeks of closures due to slips between Pukirua Bay and Paikakariki. Our reporter Crystal Gibbons and cameraman Angus Drever went to have a look.
This massive slip has stopped all traffic heading down what used to be the main road up to the Kapiti coast. It's been closed for 3 weeks and crews have been working around the clock to get the road reopened. From up above, you can see crews still clearing the slip to reveal the state highway underneath. Wakakotahi Regional Manager Mark Owen says it's been a major job.
When it first came down, we had a slip which closed the road, and we have geotechs that go in and analyse the slope and see what it needs to do. They identified a significant crack near the top, near where we were standing, and deemed that it was too unsafe to reopen the road.
Transmission Gully has offered residents around here an alternate route, but it's still causing some disruption. Emily Pym says for locals working on the Kapiti coast, having to drive around Transmission Gully has been challenging.
I'm mainly based at home with baby, but we normally do our shopping up in Parapara Umu, so we haven't been able to do that for the last little while. But we've been getting home deliveries for the food, so it hasn't been too bad.
Pukirua Bay store owner Rishi Patel says locals using the gully means they're bypassing stores like his.
Ever since the gully opened, it took a while for the people to come back to this way, but now the road is blocked, which means it's just like you're forcing people to get used to the gully.
Weather permitting, the road will reopen this Thursday at 5:30 a.m. But once the road reopens, a temporary speed limit will be put in place. Mark Owen says this is because more work is still to be done to make the road more resilient.
Along with this slope, we have two other vulnerable areas just on the other side of the road. We've had underslips, so there's still work required, and they're going to take a longer term in terms of putting in the permanent geotechnical safe solution.
Meanwhile, road resilience has been called into question on the nearby State Highway 58, which is also prone to slips. Porirua Mayor Anita Baker says Waka Kotahi could hand the road into the council's hands, making it the council's problem.
Well, the cost of this road is huge. As you can see from up the road here, we've had slips all the way round. We've had a death on it last year. We've had 7 cars in the harbour last year, and they haven't put a barrier up where those 7 cars have been, and it's always the same corner. Very high maintenance road with the number of slips and trees that come down. So we quite simply couldn't afford it.
Anita Baker says the council will keep making its opposition heard so it doesn't have to take on the heavy burden of the care and maintenance for the road.
And that report from Crystal Gibbons, the video version filmed by cameraman Angus Drever, will be on our web page. A search of farmland near Dunedin has been unable to unearth any remnants of the meteorite which crashed down last month. Those behind the search say it's now unlikely it will be found, but a tenacious optimist still holds out hope. Our Otago Southland reporter Timothy Brown joined the hunt.
Scientists had to occasionally make way for a procession of cattle as a working farm near Dunedin became a lab last week. A team of 20 scoured for the elusive alien rock about a fortnight ago before 50 searchers combed the farm last Friday, and a similar number of students gave it one last go over the weekend. Dr. Michelle Bannister, a senior lecturer at Canterbury University, says the rock is essentially a time capsule.
It really is. This is a building block of the material that went into making the planets, just like the one that we're walking across 4.5 billion years later.
She says its value lies in what it can tell us about the universe.
Our planet, it has wind, it has weather, it has storms, it has erosion, it has, biology, it has all of these wonderful processes modifying its interior and its surface and the landscapes that we see today. But a meteorite, the source material of that, the asteroids or the comets, that hasn't experienced any of that. So it allows us to look back at what things were like when the planets were being born.
Unfortunately, those secrets will remain hidden for some time yet, as the search was unable to unearth any remnants of the meteorite. Search coordinator Marshall Palmer, a geologist at Otago University, says it's unsurprising considering the teams are trying to track down something potentially as small as a pebble across thousands of metres of farmland.
I think it would be quite easy to find a needle in a haystack. You could just wave a magnet through it, but a meteorite is a whole order of magnitude above that.
Mr. Palmer says the chances of the meteorite now being found are slim, but he remains hopeful.
I still feel like the meteorite's out there, and that, if you just get out there on the weekends maybe and have a bit of a nosy, there's still a small possibility that we would find it. But the fact that we've had so many people scouring over the ground today, it sort of does make the probability of finding it seem a lot lower.
The meteor was spotted coming into the Earth's atmosphere by cameras set up by Fireballs Aotearoa. The network has only been online for months, with the most recent cameras set up in Southland only a week before it came down. Thomas Stevenson, a research assistant at Fireballs Aotearoa, says the network has already proven its value.
It's very fortuitous timing for us that we had those cameras in place, because without them we wouldn't have got that neat triangulation and that really confined search area.
Thomas Stevenson says while any large-scale search is finished for now, he's hopeful someone may discover the meteorite someday.
I'm just wondering, and that report was from Timothy Brown, by the way, and you can check out the videos on our webpage. How do they know someone hasn't just put it in their back pocket or found it in the dead of the night? I don't know. Television's top awards take place in Los Angeles tomorrow at midday New Zealand time. Some of the front runners in the 74th Emmys includes dramas like Succession and Squid Game, and comedies Ted Lasso and Abbott Elementary. CNN's Stephanie Elam has more.
There's blood in the water. Sharks are coming.
From the ruthless to the hopeful.
I know this school is rough, but we make do.
The Emmys are here, ready to celebrate the best of the small screen.
All will be revealed.
HBO and HBO Max lead the way with a whopping 140 nominations. Media empire drama Succession snagging 25 of those noms.
I'm better than you.
And acting nods for essentially the entire cast. HBO, like CNN, is part of Warner Brothers Discovery.
Succession is a show that
Meteorite is beloved in this industry, partly because it parodies this industry so well.
While it may be the show to beat, don't count out newcomer Yellow Jackets or Netflix thrillers Stranger Things and Squid Game.
There's a good chance that Squid Game can kind of sneak in and be the first non-English language show to ever win Best Drama. Keep an eye on some of the actors from that show as well.
Like Korean actress Young Ho Eun, who won a SAG award for her portrayal in the survival drama.
It's such an honor.
Looking to score again in the comedy category is Ted Lasso. Last year's big winner is up for 20 awards, including Best Lead Actor for Jason Sudeikis, who's also looking to repeat.
I need purpose.
Hoping to stop Ted Lasso is HBO's Barry. And Abbott Elementary. The surprise ABC hit has 7 noms, including Best Comedy and Lead Actress for the show's creator, Quinta Brunson.
It seems to have put a bit of life back into just regular network TV.
Because it is a rare broadcast hit in this day and age where everyone's talking about streaming and premium cable, Abbott Elementary is the perfect example of that, a breakout hit.
What the hell is this?
But the category to watch, some critics say, is limited series, with Pam and Tommy, Dope Sick, Inventing Anna, The Dropout, and The White Lotus, all with multiple nominations.
Welcome to The White Lotus.
Breakout star and acting nominee Murray Bartlett summing up the award season vibe.
I mean, it's been pretty epic.
And let's get to some of your feedback now. Lots of it on the COVID restrictions going on masks and vaccinations. Greg says, agree with the prof, that's Rod Jackson, that visitors to Aotearoa should be vaccinated. Mo says, I for one will be wearing a mask and bugger everyone else. We have a deadly virus still here. Tony says, ongoing mask wearing now rests with those who choose to do it. For the vast majority, let us now get on with our lives. And this listener says, totally agree with Rod Jackson. Definitely need to continue to require masks on public transport and confined spaces. Thus, a plea to Air New Zealand, please, that's all in capitals, continue to require good quality masks to be worn properly on every flight. If not, I will cancel flights already booked and travel by private car on public transport that does continue to require masks. No chin hammocks, I take it.
RNZ News at 6 o'clock. Kia ora, good evening. I'm Sarah Bradley. After more than 9 months of traffic lights, the government is scrapping the COVID-19 protection framework. It's also ending vaccine mandates, leaving any immunisation requirements up to individual employers. Our political reporter Annika Smith has more.
The Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, says case numbers and hospitalisations are at their lowest since February. She says with a highly vaccinated population and access to antiviral medicines, New Zealand can now move forward. As of midnight, it will no longer be a requirement to wear a mask anywhere except in healthcare settings and aged care facilities. The 7-day isolation period remains, but household contacts can go about their lives as usual if they return a daily negative RAT test result. In 2 weeks' time, all government vaccine mandates will end, leaving any requirements up to employers.
An epidemiologist says it's reasonable to scrap the COVID-19 protection framework, but it is a mistake to drop mask mandates for public transport. Auckland University epidemiologist Professor Rod Jackson told Checkpoint that masks should continue to be used in confined spaces such as buses and planes.
Those are settings where you're sitting right, next to somebody and you don't know whether they've got COVID. They may not know whether they've got COVID. So that's a setting where I think we should have retained masks.
Rod Jackson says those eligible should get their boosters because vaccination is a good defence against severe disease and death. However, businesses say that getting rid of masks will make all the difference to cafes and restaurants. Business leader Kirk Hope is also pleased that the government is trusting individual firms to decide how they will limit the spread of the virus. The Prime Minister says a holiday later this month will be an opportunity for people to pause and reflect. The one-off public holiday will be held on Monday, September the 26th, to mark the Queen's death. Unlike holidays such as Easter and Anzac Day, there won't be any restrictions on trading. Jacinda Ardern says it's a 1-in-70-year event and should be acknowledged.
The Queen was our sovereign, our head of state, made an enormous contribution to New Zealand through her public service. and this marks a significant end to a chapter. This gives also New Zealanders a chance to attend, should they choose, the memorial services across the country on that same day.
A state memorial service will be held in the Wellington Cathedral of St Paul, also on the 26th of this month. King Charles and the Queen Consort will travel to Parliament in London tonight to address MPs and peers at Westminster Hall. Both chambers will meet to express their condolences and King Charles will reply. The BBC's Johnny Dimmond reports.
Westminster Hall is the latest staging post in the choreography of constitutional ritual. Around 900 MPs and members of the House of Lords are expected. They'll witness the processions, a trumpet fanfare, the national anthem, and the speakers of both Houses of Parliament, Sir Lindsay Hoyle and Lord McFall, addressing and offering condolences to the King and the Queen Consort. They'll also pledge loyalty to the new sovereign.
One of the 5 people killed in the Kaikoura boating tragedy has been described as a fun-loving, quirky personality. Susan Cade is one of the 5 who died at sea after their boat, carrying 11 people on board, capsized at Goose Bay. She was a long-time member of the Wellington dance community. Her friend and dance teacher Jo Matsis says she was an incredibly warm person. She says her dance class is devastated and still coming to terms with the tragedy. The Ukrainian government forces are focusing on securing the territory they've liberated in recent fighting. It claims the Ukrainian advance has been the biggest setback Moscow has suffered in 200 days of conflict. The BBC's Hugo Bachega reports.
The Defence Minister Oleksiy Reznikov said Ukraine's counter-offensive had gone better than expected, like a snowball rolling down a hill. But he warned Kyiv would have to control and be ready to defend the liberated areas. Ukraine says more than 30 villages and towns have been recaptured, while Russian troops have been forced to abandon key positions in humiliating setbacks. But Moscow seems to be retaliating. Ukraine says civilian infrastructure was attacked last night, causing blackouts in several regions.
Masterton's mayor says it is a positive move that social housing is returning to the Wairarapa town. Housing Minister Megan Woods has announced that more than 50 Kāinga Ora homes will be built in Wairarapa and Tararua, the only places in the country without government public housing. More than 500 such homes in the area were sold by the then national government in 1999. Lynn Patterson says that should never have happened.
So that had a huge economic impact on many of our lower income families for nearly 20 years. So, that's changed now.
Lynn Patterson says Masterton District Council has 4.5 hectares of land which will be sold soon for the development of more public housing. To sport, the Spanish teenager Carlos Alcaraz says he's hungry for more success after winning his first Grand Slam tennis tournament at the US Open. At 19, he's the youngest first-time winner since his compatriot Rafael Nadal in 2005. Addressing the crowd in New York, he says he wanted to stay at the top for a long time.
This is something that I dreamed of since I was a kid, to be number 1 in the world, to be champions of a Grand Slam. I tried to achieve all the hard work that I did with my team, my family. I'm just 19 years old, so all the top decisions are with my parents, my team as well. So this is something that is really, really special for me.
Carlos Alcaraz will become the youngest world number 1 in the new rankings. That's the news.
This morning on First Up, we sat down for brunch with Auckland mayoral frontrunner Efessel Collins.
I don't think I'm the continuity candidate, only because I think I've got a different style of leadership. Mine is much more community-based. It's going to be informed more by people having the ability to have my ear. And it's going to challenge our timing, but let's do it.
And royal correspondent Richard Fitzwilliams joined us from London as Queen Elizabeth begins her final journey.
Every monarch has a particular style, but in the case of the Queen, there's no question that she was, to coin a phrase from Shakespeare, the less unparalleled.
Download First Up's podcast or join me, Nathan Rarere, live from 5 tomorrow morning here on RNZ National.
Lisa Owen and Checkpoint will be back in just a moment, but first the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland to Waikato, also Coromandel and Bay of Plenty. Occasional showers, some possibly thundery today. Waitomo to Manawatu, including the central high country. Showers, some heavy with thunderstorms possible tomorrow. Northwest gales in exposed places today. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, mostly fine, the chance of a shower. A period of northwest gales in exposed places. Horu Whenua to Wellington, also Wairarapa, Marlborough and Nelson. Showers clearing tonight, fine at first tomorrow, then showers from late morning. A period of northwest gales in exposed places. Bulla, Westland and Fiordland, showers heavy and thundery at times. For Canterbury, mainly fine, isolated showers today. Showers developing about the high country tomorrow morning, spreading elsewhere later with thunderstorms possible and snow lowering to 500 metres. For Otago and Southland, occasional showers, some possibly thundery tomorrow with snow lowering to 300 metres. And for the Chatham Islands, periods of rain easing tomorrow. Gale northeasterlies today. This is RNZ National. It's 8.5 past 6. I'll have the headlines at past.
Thanks, Sarah. No mai hoki mai. This is Checkpoint. Ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Scores of people have lined the streets of Scotland as the Queen's flag-draped coffin left Balmoral, travelled through the countryside before arriving in Edinburgh. Her body will remain in the Scottish capital for a couple of days before being flown to London for the state funeral in a week's time. The ABC's Barbara Miller has more.
A last goodbye to Balmoral, the Highland retreat where it was said the Queen could hang up her crown. There were tears in the nearby village of Ballater as the Queen's coffin passed by. Here they consider her more a neighbour than a monarch. In Aberdeen, on the east coast, 10-year-old Ruby appreciated the significance of the moment.
9 out of 10 people have lived in her reign, so it's pretty impressive, and a monarch like this is never going to happen again. So.
And what do you think of the new monarch, the king?
I think he's a good person. I think he's going to reign with his point of view on it. So I think he's going to be a good king.
Jonathan Duncan, who'd come with his son and baby grandson, wasn't so sure about the new king.
To be perfectly honest, I would rather have seen Charles step aside and maybe Prince William take up the reins. But I guess there is a line of succession to follow.
Why would you prefer that?
I just think that Prince Charles's life is a little bit tarnished with the whole Princess Diana, Camilla saga.
In the end, it was all over so quickly. Some clapped as the Queen passed by. Others didn't know what to do with themselves.
I was shaking. I can't explain it.
That's Angela Mafuko from Zimbabwe, watching on with Julianne Cole from Kyogle in New South Wales.
This is my friend Angela that I've only just met today. So we've met and we've been talking about how it did actually hit us in a way, an emotional way, that I didn't expect. I'm not a royalist.
There are still many more days of pomp and ceremony to go before the Queen's funeral. Is it the right amount? Too much? Too little?
Sometimes it can feel too much, especially sporting occasions getting cancelled and all the rest of it. But in the long term, when you look back, given that she's spent 70 years dedicating herself to the duties that she swore to undertake, I think, a weekend, 10 days is not really too much.
Much has been said about the Queen's love for Scotland, yet opinion here on the monarchy is divided. This is the country where some, including the leader Nicola Sturgeon, still toy with the idea of breaking away from the United Kingdom. For today, that debate was largely set aside as Scotland paid its respects. As the crowds thinned, Julianne and Angela weren't quite sure what to do next. But being there as the Queen made her final journey home is something they will never forget.
Friends on Facebook now.
We're friends on Facebook.
And that was Barbara Miller reporting. Countless people have been visiting the gates of Buckingham Palace, where King Charles III has been beginning his royal work as monarch. Today he met with High Commissioners from 14 Commonwealth countries, including New Zealand. A sea of flowers and notes are still being left at the scene, as the BBC's Daniela Ralph reports.
They have been arriving in their thousands. The slow, quiet walk through Green Park towards Buckingham Palace. Security guards at times had to hold the crowd back to manage the flow of people. But still, they kept coming. With no school at the weekend, there were a huge number of families here. Some even brought their pets. The mood, sober and thankful.
We're just in shock how busy it is.
It's very sad as well, like how many people like appreciated the Queen and stuff. It's like nice to see everyone coming together.
Because there's loads of people, it makes you feel better. It does. Because when everyone's sad, but then when you see other people, you feel like better.
I hadn't actually cried until I've come today. The atmosphere is amazing. It's kind of just peaceful and sort of tranquil, but very respectful.
As the crowds continue to gather here for the King, it has been a day filled with the business of royalty, the meetings and the audiences that will now take up much of his working life. King Charles arrived at Buckingham Palace from Clarence House, where he's still living. The convoy slowed as it reached the palace gates, giving the crowd a clear view. Inside, there was a reception for High Commissioners based in London. Many he will have known already. And he spent time with the Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly, two men new to their roles. With him, Camilla, Queen Consort, as she too begins a new stage of her life as a working royal. The proclamation of a new king in front of Windsor Castle.
It has pleased Almighty God to call to his mercy our late Sovereign Lady, Queen Elizabeth II of blessed and glorious memory, by whose decease the crown of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland is solely and rightfully come to the Prince Charles Philip Arthur George.
This royal town has been mourning a queen who made her home here in recent years. What is becoming increasingly clear is the public's desire to do something or go somewhere as a way of paying their respects. It is a feeling likely to strengthen in the coming days ahead of the state funeral.
And it is 14 minutes after 6. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Ukraine's military says it has reclaimed 3,000 square kilometres of territory in its counter-offensive this month. Ukrainian officials say soldiers have entered Kupiansk, a vital supply hub for Russian forces. Russia says its troops have retreated from the nearby town of Izium to allow them to regroup. It could become the most significant advances around Kiev since April. The BBC's Orla Guerin reports.
The sound of battle as Ukrainian troops push forward. Their counter-offensive is gaining ground rapidly, catching Russian forces off guard, even surprising some Ukrainians. The troops recorded this material themselves. Journalists have been banned from the front lines. This was the moment when Ukrainian forces freed the city of Balaklia. Elderly residents emerging from shelters, weeping in relief. Everything is okay, troops tell locals. For 6 months we prayed you would come, one woman said. I'm in the yard of an old school, under the shade of a tree. There's a series of buildings here, and they're now being used to provide a temporary home for Ukrainians who fled the fighting. And we've come to meet a couple who are farmers. They're both 50, Natalia and Volodymyr. Natalia, too, endured months under occupation by the Russians, who she calls fascists. For them, Ukraine's counter-offensive has meant freedom. Ukrainian troops arrived in their village on the 2nd of September, liberating the area and ending months of Russian occupation. Natalia, what was that moment like for you when you saw your own troops?
We thought we would never see them. And then our boys came. And they were so handsome. So beautiful. Especially compared to the fascists. I didn't know what to do with them, if I should hug them or hold their hands. And I was very happy.
Just hours before the offensive began, hundreds of Ukrainian troops gathered in a forest, singing the national anthem. It's now a battle hymn, and they believe momentum is swinging their way. But the Russians still hold around a fifth of Ukraine, including the city of Kherson. This was the resistance on the streets back in March. It was the first major Ukrainian city to fall after the invasion. We managed to reach a woman still living there who says the Russians are starting to lie low. For her protection, we aren't naming her, and her words are spoken by a BBC producer.
If street fighting starts, it will be very dangerous. But I will sit in the basement for days or weeks, if needs be. I want to see the victory.
The recent gains are cathartic for Ukraine and reassuring for its Western backers. Few would imagine a swift end to the war, but the Ukrainians have now shown they can beat the Russians in battle, not just outmaneuver them.
New evidence has emerged in the US showing how far-right extremist groups are infiltrating the public service. A membership database for the anti-government militia, the Oath Keepers, has been leaked, on which there are hundreds of law enforcement officers, elected officials and members of the military. CNN's Joss Campbell has more.
They are specifically targeting law enforcement and military to be part of their organization.
Police chiefs, county sheriffs, military service members and others reaching out to a noted extremist group. This according to a new report by the Anti-Defamation League.
What we found in our investigation was 373 individuals who are currently serving in law enforcement that we believe signed up for Oath Keeper membership.
The ADL says that number could be higher. It poured through more than 38,000 leaked names published by a nonprofit whistleblower site in 2021, listing the alleged membership roles of the far-right anti-government group.
What it is a snapshot of the ability of the Oath Keepers and their agenda to attract people in positions of power to express interest in their movement.
Members of some groups, including the Oath Keepers, have been accused of plotting to block the transfer of power in 2021, stockpiling weapons near Washington and storming the Capitol on January 6th. The Oath Keepers leader, Stuart Rhodes, and 10 others have been criminally charged. Rhodes and the others have pleaded not guilty. His trial begins later this month.
There's two universes here of Oath Keeper members. There's the world before January 6th, where people could have found their way to the website, heard about it through a friend, thought, well, this is good. They're keeping their oath to the country. Then there's the world after January 6th, where you realize this is a group that actively, among multiple chapters, engaged in seditious conspiracy.
And the concern goes far beyond the Oath Keepers, to include a range of other domestic extremist groups like the Proud Boys, the so-called Three Percenters, and others. National security experts have been raising alarms over the number of police officers accused of taking part in the Capitol siege, and at least 95 January 6 defendants who served in the U.S. military, according to a CNN review.
We want individuals who are charged with protecting public safety, who have taken an oath to uphold the law, to obviously not be affiliated in any way with organizations whose mission is to go against law enforcement.
Carrie Cordero of the Center for a New American Security is helping spearhead an in-depth study on countering extremism, including why extremists have sought out military and police veterans.
They have tactical skills. They have skills with weapons. They understand and are trained in how to conduct an actual assault.
The ADL's review of alleged Oath Keeper members found one purported military member wrote, "I currently coordinate ground movements. I have influence on nearly 46,000 Marines and sailors." A California police officer wrote he had a wide variety of law enforcement experience, including undercover operations, surveillance, and SWAT. Since January 6, Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin has intensified efforts to root out radicalization in the military. And some police departments have expelled officers with ties to extremism, including a former Virginia cop who was fired after being sentenced to over 7 years in prison for breaching the Capitol on January 6th.
What you want to do is vet people in the recruiting process. What does their social media show? Some of this is just about the basics. Most police departments have rules about what kind of organizations you can join. No, you can't be a member of the Ku Klux Klan. No, you can't be a member of an organization that supports the overthrow of the U.S. government.
While the number of people the ADL found to be associated with the Oath Keepers is small compared to the actual number of police and defense professionals nationwide, even a small group of domestic extremists can be dangerous.
You can't have people who go to work one day at one place with an oath to defend the Constitution in the United States, and then the next day, as part of an outside group, are trying to overthrow the same.
And that report was from CNN. An investigation by ABC Australia has revealed links between Sydney street gangs and some of Australia's notorious crime families. At least a dozen people have been killed in the city's gangland conflicts over the past couple of years, many in drive-by shootings. Our correspondent Grace Tobin has this report.
No, we don't stop and hesitate, brother. We fully automatic. We got hollers, we got backs, brother. Fully causing havoc.
In a shopping centre car park in Sydney's southwest suburbs, Demons and his crew are filming a rap video for his social media.
Cut throat, in your throat, leave the scene, tape it.
The lyrics are raw and very real. He's rapping about a crime he's been convicted and sent to youth detention for, the stabbing of a 20-year-old with a box cutter.
And at the end of the day, we solve all our problems. We don't run away from them. And so, yeah, one thing led to another. That happened.
Why did you stab him?
I don't know. Actually, I don't know much about him, mate, so can't really speak on that.
Well, why did you need to stab him then if you didn't know much about him?
You know, shit happens.
Demons says an ongoing conflict between postcode gangs means taking a train to an area that's not his can be dangerous.
Obviously, we all know there's like conflict in West Sydney. There's a war going on right now. So, yeah, everyone knows which lines to take. And if you're willing to go that way, you know, you've got to be prepared to go to war.
The
19-year-old says he's trying to leave gang life behind, but his music is part of a subgenre of rap called drill, where artists must reference real violence. It's concerning New South Wales Police.
The basis of drill music is that unless you have actually done the crime, so unless you've actually done the act that you are singing about, you generally can't sing about that act.
Acting Assistant Commissioner Jason Weinstein says while he hasn't yet found any examples of drill music inciting violence, it has further inflamed tensions between postcode gangs.
Some of the music was about a tit-for-tat type scenario, and there was some baiting going on.
A major artist on the police radar is rapper A Huncho. The 25-year-old, whose real name is Ali Yunus, is a member of Sydney's notorious Alameddine family.
People know that, like, when I rap, you're hearing realness, you know, you're not hearing no fake shit. I come from that environment, so I would say I'm the realest rapper that this country's got. Most dangerous, I don't know, that's for the audience to decide.
Four Corners has uncovered links between Sydney's organised crime networks and postcode gangs. In a shooting late last year, 4 alleged associates of the Alameddine family were targeted outside a gym. One of the alleged gunmen has been a high-profile member of the Mount Druitt postcode gang. He was allegedly hired by a member of the rival Hamzi family. Police allege the Alameddines also use members of a street gang as their foot soldiers.
And they might facilitate the movement of drugs, the storage of firearms. They may go and do kidnappings on behalf of that organised crime family.
A Huncho has been accused of recruiting young gang members into the Alameddine crime network, a claim he denies.
There's no criminal network. There's nothing like that. It's just that's something that the police have made up or the media have made up. There's no such thing of it. There's no crime network.
And that report was from the ABC. The Queen's death has prompted a mixed response in the Caribbean, where there's already been a push among a number of former British colonies to cut ties with the monarchy. Campaigners in Jamaica, for instance, are increasingly confident it marks the end of an era and the island will soon become a republic. The ABC's Jade McMillan is in Kingston.
At a busy market in downtown Kingston, there's a sense of sadness among many of the stallholders. 70-year-old Marie Mitchell was born around the same time that Queen Elizabeth ascended to the throne.
I grew up hearing about her
And, you know, we always like to go to school. We talk about the Queen and the King and the Prince and the Princesses.
The Queen visited Jamaica on 6 occasions, and Charlie McLean says she had the opportunity to meet her more than once.
She was, what would call it now, a people person.
But while many older Jamaicans hold fond memories of Her Majesty, views have shifted when it comes to younger generations. 36-year-old JD believes it's time for his country to sever its ties with the monarchy.
I've never been one to acknowledge the Queen or the royal family in that regard, so it's neither here nor there, but it's sad losing a loved one. So in that regard, I feel sorry for the family.
When Jamaica gained independence from Britain in 1962, it kept Queen Elizabeth as its head of state. Now there's a growing push to become a republic, just as Barbados did last year. Jamaica's Prime Minister surprised many in March during an at times awkward visit by the now Prince and Princess of Wales by telling Prince William his country was moving on. Protesters took to the streets of Kingston during that tour, demanding a formal apology from the monarchy over its historical links to the transatlantic slave trade, which saw hundreds of thousands of enslaved people from Africa forced to work on Jamaican plantations. Scholar and advocate Rosalie Hamilton says reparations should also be paid.
The wealth that has been built was built on the backs of the blood, sweat and tears of our foreparents. And I think that reality is beginning to hit home because that's not the history we were taught. Compensation takes many forms. There's institutional compensation that's on the table. There's debt forgiveness. So it's not simply about cash payment. It's about a process of healing.
Speaking in Jamaica earlier this year, Prince William expressed what he described as profound sorrow over slavery, echoing comments made by his father, the now King Charles III, when he told the ceremony marking the shift to a republic in Barbados that slavery, quote, forever stains our history. Jamaican advocates hope it's a sign of a different approach from a new monarch.
And that report was from the ABC's Jade McMillan in Kingston. We're almost out of time. Just a reminder that the Late News team will keep you updated throughout the night. If you missed anything from the program, you can find Checkpoint on Spotify, Apple or wherever you get your podcasts from. Ko te kaupapa tuatahi a pōpō, and tomorrow from 5 a.m, First Up has reaction to the scrapping of the COVID traffic light system. And they ask Nationals Deputy Leader Nicola Willis, where is the report on Sam Uffindale's behaviour? I'd be tuning in to hear the answer to that one. Kaua e wari te atatero e a mātou kōrero. Heaps of stories and our video versions of stories online. Check them out.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Epidemiologist Rod Jackson says the decision to scrap the COVID-19 protection framework is reasonable, but masks should be required on public transport. Mask mandates end at midnight tonight, apart from health and aged care settings, and incoming travellers and aircrew no longer have to be vaccinated. All other government vaccine mandates will end in 2 weeks. The Prime Minister says the public holiday announced for September the 26th to mark the Queen's death will give people time to pause and reflect. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather is at 7.
I'm Catherine Ryan, inviting you to enter 9 to Noon's 2022 short story competition. We're looking for stories of 2,000 words. The top 5 winners, chosen by our judges Harry Ricketts and Rebecca Riley, will be adapted for radio and broadcast on 9 to Noon in November. We had a terrific response last year and hope you'll be equally keen this year. So if you're 16 or over and your story hasn't been published before, have a go. Entries close on September the 30th. For details, go to our webpage or to rnz.co.nz/short story. And stay tuned to 9 to Noon on RNZ National.
Kia ora, Catherine, and I'm Brian Crump, getting ready for another night on RNZ National. Lovely to have your company. Coming up in my program, well, after the news at 7, it's Bradley Warrington, a.k.a. DJ Sticky Fingers. And he is going to continue his own personal story of Kiwi hip-hop, a story that he is quite intimately involved in himself. And later on, I heard that First Up will be doing some reaction to the government's announcement about masks and such things in terms of COVID protection. I'm pretty sure there'll be some reaction in Lately with Karen Hay to the government's moves today after the news at 10 this evening. Zoe George is talking sport with me after 9. And because Zoe brings her own special feminist point